Hi everybody, my name is Rachael Alexander. I'm a workplace mental health psychologist, and what I'm going to do today is take you through the process of how to manage your employees' mental health. Now, obviously, at this time of COVID, it's even more important to be aware of your employees' mental health because we're in a massive time of uncertainty. However, generally, the ability to support your employees with the mental health is absolutely essential for the success of your business. And that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today. So I'm not particularly going to focus on COVID. I'm just going to generally talk about how to manage your employees' mental health. But clearly it's important to be doing that right now. So my experience is I have 2 degrees in psychology. I have worked for over 15 years going into organisations, helping organisations prioritise the mental health of their employees. And you may ask, well, why would they do that? Why would they invest money in prioritising the mental health of their employees? And what some organisations have realised is the more they support their employee with the mental health, the better success they have, the more financial success they have, increased productivity, reduced absenteeism, improved morale, improved relationships with employees. So what I'm going to try and do through this presentation is show you why managing your employees' mental health is so important and how to do that, because a lot of employers, managers, company owners are actually scared of managing their employees' mental health. So what I want to do today is firstly welcome you and say congratulations for signing up to this webinar. It is so important to be able to understand about mental health in employees. So, you know, congratulations for saying, actually, this is really important to me as a company owner, as a manager. I really want to learn how to do this. We will be talking about practical guidance, not HR legal advice. So I am not a HR expert. What I am is a psychologist in understanding about mental health. So I will not be discussing personal case examples of somebody with stress or depression. That's not what this session is about. It's about giving you practical guidance to understand mental health in your organisation and how to support your employees. And managing mental health is not as scary as you think it is. In my experience, when I first go and work with organisations, they have not looked at this area before because they think it is opening up a can of worms. They think it is something that they are getting involved in that they then don't know what's going to happen once they start talking stress and mental health. So by the end of the session, you'll understand that that's not what it's about at all. It is a very simple process to be able to talk to your staff about mental health and understand it. If you have any questions as I'm going along, please just use the chat function and I'll answer the questions to break it up. My preferred style is obviously being in front of a group of people, being in front of a room, making the session quite interactive with questions and comments. So, you know, it is a little bit different for me doing it like this. So please, you know, try and be as interactive as possible and make comments and questions, and I'll try to answer those as I go along. So what are we going to be talking about today in the 2 hours? Well, first of all, we're going to understand your roles and responsibilities regarding employee mental health. So by law, what is it you are actually expected to do regarding employee mental health? I'm going to give you some tips on how to recognise poor mental health, and we'll be talking about that in yourself and others. I am presenting another webinar on the Thursday, the 7th of May, which is just going to focus more on managing mental health in yourself, so you might like to sign up for that as well. But how to define good mental health and how to recognise it is the first step in supporting your employees. How to help your employees understand and take responsibility for their own mental health. So what I'm going to be talking to you about in this presentation, guys, is you as a manager or a company owner will have some responsibilities, but more importantly, the staff member has their own responsibilities to manage their own mental health. And it's important to understand the difference. So I'm going to be talking to you about that. I'm also going to give you a template for having an effective conversation with your employee regarding their mental health. If we were face to face, I would be giving you a booklet that would have the template in the booklet, but I've written out some of the questions, so at least you can copy some down, and it'll give you a process for how to have an effective conversation with your employee regarding the mental health. And more importantly, probably should have been the first objective, how to take ownership of providing optimum working conditions to promote positive mental health in your workplace. So what do you need to do as a company owner, as a leader, as a manager to ensure that there are optimum working conditions so that poor mental health does not start in your workplace? So first of all, let's just look at why should I talk mental health to my employees? And first of all, quite simply, business productivity. I am presuming that you are on this webinar because you are passionate about your business, you're passionate about making your business a success. And focusing on the mental health of your employees is going to ensure that you get to that success. So I'm going to give you some reasons as we move forward why poor mental health will be affecting your productivity. Secondly, as a manager, I don't know if you're a company owner or a manager or who's responsible for managing employee well-being, but a manager should have the confidence and knowledge to manage mental health matters. So that means recognise some signs and symptoms of mental health. That does not mean that you are expected to recognise things like, depression, anxiety, in the sense of being able to diagnose it. That is not what this is about. This is just being able to recognise some basic symptoms of if somebody's struggling with stress and poor mental health. And I'm going to give you those symptoms as we move through. Knowing when and how to intervene. So intervene is in red because that is your duty of care, that is your responsibility, and I'm going to be covering that. Know what additional support is available to you and the employer. So we are very fortunate in this area that there are a lot of external support that employees can get to be able to help them with their mental health, such as the NHS, such as charities that are out there. So one of your roles is being able to signpost to the employee to go and get additional help for their mental health. Empowerment. A leader's role is to equip your staff to have the knowledge, tools and confidence to look after their own mental health. So, a great leader is always about empowering their staff member. So this is about you passing on the knowledge to your employees to give them the skills to be able to manage their own mental health so that they are able to focus on the task in hand that you are assigning to them as your manager. And I think, at the end of the day, it is because it is the right thing to do. A poll done by some research done by ACAS found that 73% of employees think it is a manager's role to recognise and address stress and anxiety in the workplace. Now, you might not necessarily agree with that, but the point is, it's the perception of the employee that they feel it is a manager's role to recognise and address stress and anxiety in the workplace. And that's what I'm going to help you to do by this presentation today. So that's really 4 good reasons there why we should be talking mental health to our employees. Now, if you take one thing away from this presentation, I want you to take this point away. Your workforce is your greatest asset. A very wise man once said that to me. So, think about it, that you service your car so that your car doesn't break down, so that your car stays in, its optimum condition, so that you can rely on your car for doing the job of getting you from A to B. So why don't we think that helping our staff to stay in optimum condition is just as important? It's like we've sort of missed that point, that if we expect our staff to be able to carry out the tasks that we are asking our staff member to do, then if we can support our staff in being able to do that, then as a manager, as an employer, we win, because the staff is able to complete the tasks that we are asking them to do to enable our business to be successful, to meet its goals, to meet its objectives. So, this is why focusing on mental health in your employees is actually an asset for yourself as well as for your employees. So why should I not talk mental health to employees? Well, it's interesting. Whenever you say to somebody the words mental health, immediately what comes back often is very negative connotations about mental health. So just think about it for yourself for a minute. If I say to you mental health, what you may think is something like anxiety, depression, suicide, ill health, not being very well. It's got a very negative connotation as mental health, and that's because we only really hear in the news and in the media about the adverse cases of mental health, such as somebody that's maybe committed suicide, or somebody that's gone on a gun rampage in America, or somebody that's jumped off the Humber Bridge. We only usually hear about the adverse connotations of mental health, whereas actually that is like that's the end of a very long line of mental health. So many employers, many company owners do not want to, if you like, talk mental health because they're so worried about what's going to come back, because they're going to assume that negative things are going to come back. So hopefully by the end of this presentation, you will appreciate that that isn't what mental health is about at all. That is just one end of a spectrum of mental health. So that's why many employees don't really like to get involved in mental health. So I quite like this image of sort of like what you would imagine as somebody going for therapy. So you lost your job, you wrecked your car, the bank took your house, and your wife left you. But you can't let one bad day ruin your whole week. So that's sort of like my point in saying, you may be scared of this happening when you start asking your staff member about their mental health. But you are not God, you are not a counsellor, you are not a coach, you are not a therapist, you are not a healer. Your job is just to create that space to be able to allow the employee to bring up anything they want to bring up, but then to signpost. It's not for you to sort out anything that is unrelated to the workforce. So yes, it is your responsibility to look at issues that might be causing them stress around the work. But if it's something like a divorce, or that the children, not doing well at school and they're getting into trouble, that is not your job to sort that out. And we're going to talk about that in more detail as we go on. So you're not God, you're not a counsellor, you're not a therapist. You are just there to see what you can change in the workplace to help them, but also to signpost them to somewhere else so that they can get help for any additional pressures that are being caused by the home life. So again, I'm going to talk about that in more detail as we go through. So we've said poor mental health is bad for business, because if somebody's struggling with their mental health, if you've got an employee that is struggling with their mental health, what that means is they are unable to focus on their work 100%. So they are not focused. They are not able to perform their tasks at 100%. And I'm not saying that somebody with poor mental health is not a good employee, because that's not right. That's not right to say. They are a good employee when they have the right support, whether that be some form of maybe medication that they need, or some form of therapy that they're getting. It's when the poor mental health is not being recognised, addressed, or talked about, that's when they're costing you money. So how does poor mental health affect business productivity? So this was a research done by CIPD a couple of years ago, and they took a selection of people that did have poor mental health and actually asked them, well, how does this affect you doing your job? How does this affect you with your productivity? And 85% of those asked admitted they had difficulty in concentrating. So you know as well as I do that if we have difficulty in concentrating, then the work isn't getting done, the tasks are not getting completed. When they were concentrated, they were saying that tasks took longer to do. So they weren't getting through their workload as quick as somebody with good mental health. Unable to make decisions. So there's a lot of fear around making decisions in business anyway. But when you've got somebody with poor mental health, if 54% are struggling to make a decision, then how is your work getting done? How is your business moving forward You know, how is the creativity and the innovation happening if your staff are struggling to make decisions? As well as that, they have a difficulty in juggling a number of tasks. So multitasking is maybe not something that they're able to cope with. Quite worrying, 48% say they're less patient with customers and clients. So bang, straight away, your customer service is being affected there. So these people could be losing you customers. They could be the originator of customer complaints. If they're a little bit rude or a little bit short with customers, then bang, you've got a customer complaint there. They may be putting off challenging work, so you know, things may not be getting moved on, may not be getting processed because they don't want to complete the challenging work, and more likely to get into conflict with others. So if you've got a team that are in disharmony, or if you've got a staff member that is quite confrontational, it may be that there's some poor mental health at the roots of that behaviour. So what you can see is that is why poor mental health is bad for business. So if we could help all those staff have good mental health, you can see that decisions are going to be made, tasks are going to be completed, they're going to be focused, they're going to have high customer service levels, they're going to get through a large volume of work, and there's going to be harmony both with internal customers and external customers. So again, the subject or the title mental health is quite ambiguous. In a lot of academic research, all the academics seem to sort of like struggle with a definition of what mental health is. And so I'm quite a simple girl, and I've took this from, I think I took this from Mind, which are a brilliant organisation. And poor mental health is the way that you think, feel and behave becomes impossible to cope with. So people naturally think that poor mental health is your anxiety, depression, bipolar, suicide, things like that, or the start. Poor mental health is the start of leading to severe mental health. But actually mental health is just the way that you think, feel and behave. Now it's interesting, isn't it? Because if we said physical health to somebody, you would straight away get probably an idea that physical health means how well you keep yourself physically, how well you take responsibility for yourself physically. And mental health is exactly the same. How well do we look after ourselves so that we think, feel and behave in a positive way? So when employees have poor mental health, it means they're thinking in a way and feeling in a way and behaving in a way which means it's affecting their day-to-day living. And so that means that employees are unable to focus on their job, which we've just talked about, meaning that they're failing to be a revenue generating asset for you. So if I earn accountants, for example, and my staff are revenue generating, so how well they do their job means how much money I'm going to earn as a company owner. If they're not focused on their job, then they're not going to be a revenue generating asset for me. And that might sound quite clinical, and we're going to look at the opposite side of things about, you know, it's just the right thing to do to help employees who are struggling with the mental health from a human being, from one human being to another human being. If somebody's struggling mentally, surely it's just the right thing to do to help them get to good mental health. So at the other end of the scale, you can imagine this is a line. On the other end of the line is good mental health. And this is when the way that we think, feel and behave enables somebody to live the life that they want to live. And that is how simple it is for the definition for me. So employees with good mental health commit to their job 100% because they're able to. They're able to commit to the job because they haven't got thoughts and feelings and behaviour which is becoming impossible to deal with. And so when employees are committing to the job, then they become a revenue generating asset. And as a business owner, what I want in my company is I want all my staff to be revenue generating assets. So if I can help them have good mental health, I'm going to help them have good mental health because I'm going to benefit and it's the right thing to do. So my conscience can be clear. So that is basically what we're talking about: mental health, the way you think, feel and behave. Therefore, we have a responsibility to think, feel and behave in the best way possible as we go through our life. Okay, so what causes our mental health to deteriorate? And I'll just say, guys, that if some of you have struggled with mental health in your life, then just look after yourself. I've struggled with mental health in my life. That's because life does affect mental health. So when I went through a very challenging divorce, my mental health did deteriorate. And so, you know, if you're struggling with mental health at the moment, then just look after yourself, in that you haven't done anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with you per se. It's just maybe that we've not learned the most appropriate ways to look after our mental health. So the start of poor mental health, guys, is stress. That is where poor mental health starts. So at the moment, I'm seeing a lot of stressed people about. And the reason why a lot of people are stressed at the moment is because of uncertainty. We are in an uncertain time. And when we are uncertain, our brains doesn't like uncertainty because we feel at risk. So at any point in time, anybody can start to suffer with stress. And the definition of stress is the perceived demands being placed upon us versus our perceived ability to handle those demands. So for me, I've been a presenter for over 20 years, so that does not stress me out. However, if I was asked, I don't know, to go and be an accountant, then that would stress me out because I do not really understand figures and accounts. So stress is caused by, this is so important, I'm just going to repeat it. Stress is caused by the demands that are being asked of you versus your perceived ability to handle those demands. So for example, if you've had some staff members that worked in the office and now they've been asked to work from home, that might have created stress in them because their perceived ability to be able to work from home on their own, without a supervisor, without their team around them, may be causing them some stress. So the word perceived there is very important. The word perceived is meaning it's how they feel about the situation. So as a manager or an employer, it's very easy to think, oh, my staff member won't get stressed about that. I wouldn't get stressed about that, having to work from home. But that's irrelevant. It's the employee's perceived ability about how well they can handle their demands. So stress is the start of poor mental health, because if we have too much stress at any one time, we then start to fail to be able to think logically. And that's when your business gets affected, because if you have staff who are stressed and who can't think logically, then that's when they start thinking emotionally. And when they're thinking emotionally, they're not in the part of the brain that thinks rationally, that thinks strategically. They're in the part of the brain that reacts emotionally. So often when I go into workplaces, I'll hear managers, leaders, supervisors say things like, it's like managing a group of kids. And that's because when the staff are stressed, they go into that emotional part of the brain, which is the childhood part of the brain. And so we start reacting emotionally rather than logically. And this is why it's so important to educate your staff on emotional resilience, because what you're doing there is you're showing them, or you're teaching them, to have an increased perceived ability to handle anything that comes in their work. You're basically saying to them, I'm going to train you so that you believe you can handle these demands. And that's why when I offer emotional resilience training to employees, you see an uptake in the skill level of the staff member, because they feel more confident in their ability to handle demands, therefore they're less stressed. So that's how the link is closed. Okay, so harmful levels of stress can lead to poor mental health. So why do some people suffer with stress and other people don't? I bet you have teams where you can give one member absolutely loads of work and they just plough their way through it, and you've got another team member who really struggles and gets emotional and really needs that supervision from somebody. So there's many contributing factors as to why one person would suffer with stress. First of all, it's their past, their DNA, their upbringing, the trauma. Research shows that if we've been raised in a traumatic child, if we've had a traumatic childhood, then we are predisposed to suffering with stress and anxiety. Because if you like, our body goes on a red alert because we have been raised in an environment where we had to be on red alert because we didn't feel safe. So our body and our reactions are predisposed, and it's like being on red alert all the time. So that's why one member can suffer with stress more depending on what's happened to them in the past. Stress can be caused by bereavement. So because there's so much grief involved in the bereavement process, we can get stressed easier if we've suffered with a bereavement. Employees with financial problems, relationship breakdowns, or family problems or ill health, these can all contribute to them feeling more stressed. If you then have an employee at work, their workload may cause them stress. The way that they're being managed may be causing them stress, and they'll probably struggling to balance home and work, which is all contributing to how much stress that they will experience. Now, like I said earlier, all the home contributing factors there is not for you to sort out. What is for you to sort out is looking at what's causing stress in the work, and I'm going to come to that later on in more detail. So this is just explaining why some people struggle with stress more than others. So I just want to give you two case examples here, and if we were having an interactive face-to-face session, this would be a breakout time, and it would create some discussion around the case examples that I'd be giving you. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time just to have a read of them and see what you think. So this is one of your employees. Angela is 46 years old and an only child. She has 3 children aged 5, 10 and 15. She's recently found some weed in her eldest son's rucksack, approached him to talk about it, but the conversation resulted in an argument, and now they're not speaking to each other. Her 5-year-old has started with night tremors and climbs into her parents' bed frequently. She also recently attended a parents' evening, and the teacher expressed concern regarding her 10-year-old daughter's hostile attitude. Angela's overtime has also been stopped at work, which is affecting payment of the household bills. Her mother has just started with signs of dementia, and her father, who has always suffered with depression, is struggling to cope looking after his wife. Angela also thinks she's starting with the menopause, as she's having hot flushes and feels lethargic. So this is when I work privately with individuals, one of the first things that I will ask the individual to do is tell me what's going on for you right now. You've come to me with stress, you've come to me with anxiety, depression, what's going on for you right now? So I'd take a very basic case history. So this would be a common example of what I would be being told. I want you to think that you're Angela's manager, and I want you just to think about all the different things that Angela has going on for her, and how able is she to be a productive employee for you. So pretend you don't know anything about Angela. You do not know what is going on in her private life, and then you ask her you notice that she's upset one day, and you ask her what's going on, and she tells you all this information. And I get that you can feel overwhelmed if you got told this information, but hopefully what you're getting from the point of this slide is, wow, how is Angela managing to do her job? How is Angela managing to do all the tasks that I'm asking her to do? Because surely her brain is just focused on all these stresses and pressures of what she's got going on in her life. And how is she managing to work full time, but then also to sort out her 3 children and the issues that come with those 3 children? So you can see that a mother just started with signs of dementia, and that she's an only child. So therefore, she's going to have a responsibility there, probably to a mother. A father has always suffered with depression. So straight away I'm thinking, okay, so Angela's grown up in a household with a father that's always suffered with depression, which has meant there's probably some trauma in her past life, in her younger life, meaning that maybe she doesn't seem to manage stress very well. Now, I'm not saying this is the conversation that you should be having in your head about getting to the root of her issues. What I am saying is it's about maybe thinking as a manager, how can I cut Angela some slack? How can I help her to sort out all these different issues so that she becomes a productive employee again, and so that she's not in pain, because she's obviously got a lot of emotional pain there. So, for example, if Angela told you this story, straight away you might think, right, do I need to give her some time off to go and have a conversation with the teacher of the 10-year-old? You know, teachers tend to finish, or you can tend to see teachers about 4 o'clock or 4:30, 3:30. So can I, you know, cut her some slack to be able to go and have a conversation with the teacher to try and resolve this? So we will be talking later on about adjustments that you can make. Legally, you don't have to make them unless a disability has been diagnosed, but this is what I want you to start thinking about. How can I help Angela manage all this stress in order that she then is able to focus on her job and become a revenue generating asset? So let's look at another example. So we've got David. David's 32, has been married for 5 years. He and his partner have no children currently and have been trying to adopt for the last 2 years, but the process is taking time. His partner recently obtained a promotion at work, which has increased responsibility, meaning his partner is more withdrawn and irritable than usual, causing challenges in the relationship. David's parents divorced when he was 12 and he witnessed domestic violence. His best friend from university recently committed suicide, which was a real shock as he didn't know she was feeling this way. To help him cope with his grief, David has been drinking more red wine than usual and he is thinking of going to the doctors to get some antidepressants as he is feeling helpless and lost. So again, if you talk to, you know, the majority of employees, we've all got stuff going on in our life. We've all got a backstory. You listening to this, there will be some things that you're trying to deal with at the moment, as well as dealing with COVID. So we all have things that are going on. From a manager's or a company owner's point of view, again, it's just having the awareness that if David's drinking more red wine than usual, and he's turning up for work the next day, how is that affecting his decision-making skills? How is that affecting his cognitive processing skills? How is that affecting his relationships with clients and customers? Because he's probably a little bit hungover. He's probably a little bit tired because you don't tend to sleep very well drinking a lot of red wine. Well, I didn't used to anyway. The fact that he's thinking of going to the doctors to get some antidepressants, it's been proven that antidepressants, you know, stop you from thinking and feeling as rational and as strategic as if you're not on antidepressants. So again, just from a manager's point of view, just take a moment just to think, wow, how can I help David to sort out these issues or to signpost him to somebody that will sort out his issues? What can I do in the workplace to help relieve the stresses of what's happening? What can I do to relieve his workload that might be putting more pressure on him? And we'll talk about the fact of it's not your job to rescue, it's not your job to solve, but it is your job to intervene. And it is your job to signpost to places that people could get help. And I'm going to give you the process of how you would have that conversation. Okay, just to say then on this route that, you know, and this might be for you personally, a bit of help for you personally, that are tablets the cure to stress? Are antidepressants the cure to stress? Well, my own opinion is sometimes tablets are needed if somebody is in such a poor place, and yes, sometimes tablets are needed, but tablets do not get to the root of what is causing the stress. The only way we can do that is self-awareness and talking to somebody, whether that be a friend or a therapist, or, you know, it might be a manager or an employer. So, you know, yes, sometimes tablets are needed if somebody's in a bad place, but actually we have to get to the root cause of what is causing the stress. So educating your staff so they are better able to handle changes, which means whatever happens, they don't get overwhelmed so easily and they stay focused on the tasks. So a lot of work I do is going in and working and training staff how to become emotionally resilient, so they're better able to manage the changes that are happening in the business or manage personal changes. So how would you recognise poor mental health in your staff? Well, first of all, absence. You know, if there's a regular pattern of absence, or if somebody's been really well one day and then the next minute they're maybe they're not at work, but they were absolutely fine the next day, then, you know, it may not be a genuine absence. Research shows that a lot of staff members, they ring in sick with a physical, citing they've got a physical illness when actually it's a stress or emotional illness. So we do need to be aware of that. If staff are negative or unmotivated, changes in productivity, so maybe they were productive and now maybe they're not so productive, mood swings or mood changes, tiredness, upsetment, tears, losing temper easily, looking harassed, withdrawn, using substances. If they start saying, oh God, I ended up having, you know, a bottle of wine last night, but that gets more and more repetitive, then we're thinking, well, why are they drinking so much? What are they trying to numb? What are they trying to cope with? If you do ask them and they just say, I'm fine, and it's an I'm fine response, and you think, I think there's something more going on because I've seen you come out of the toilet crying, for example, then they may not be being honest with you, and we'll look at why that might be. Struggling to make decisions and problems with colleagues. Now, clearly, just for the time, that's a very short list that I've just given you there for recognising poor mental health, but there are, you know, online lots of lists of how to recognise poor mental health in staff. However, the point is, when you start following the process that I'm going to give you in this presentation to talk to staff about mental health, you're going to get the answers anyway. You're not going to have to look for signs. You're going to be hopefully getting the answers from them about what is stressing them out. Okay, so basically when it comes to mental health, the quicker you take steps to dissolve the problems, the quicker the solutions, which obviously means reduced productivity issues, and their mental health improves rather than deteriorates. And I sort of like want to say that as a manager, chief, you know, CEO, company owner, you are in a really powerful position here, because you could be the only person who genuinely cares about their well-being. So if you look at, say, the Angela example, she was an only child, her mother's struggling, her father's struggling. So who is helping her? Single parent, you know, who is helping her? So, you know, you might be one of the only people that is actually caring about somebody. And that's how you get your staff loyalty. That's how you get your engaged staff. That's how you get your presenteeism. Because basically all we as humans want is to know that somebody is bothered about us and somebody, you know, is there for us. So what a difference you possibly could be making to their life. I just want to quickly mention, this is a really good book that I once read, Snakes in Suits, When Psychopaths Go to Work. There will be there can be a small percentage of staff members who will play the mental health card sometimes. And what I mean by that is they will tell you that they've got mental health challenges, and you will make a lot of suggestions of how they can help improve their mental health, and nothing will change. Nothing seems to be changing. And, you know, use your gut feeling, have an action plan, have everything, you know, documented about what you've offered this person and what you've suggested to this person. So it's all about control measurement. But if nothing seems to be changing, then, you know, seek professional HR advice, because it may be that there are some saboteurs in workplaces that do what I call play the mental health card. So I just wanted to put that out there. Okay, so here we're going to go with a 4-step process of how to manage your employees' mental health. So the first point I want to get across is that it is a balanced responsibility. So your employee has a responsibility and you have a responsibility. So it's not up to you to have to sort everything out. It is joint ownership of getting to good mental health. So let's just break that down a little bit more. And let's first of all look at what your responsibilities are as a manager. The first point is to actually discuss mental health. Now, there's probably some of you listening to this that might be thinking, oh gosh, I never really talk about mental health. You know, don't let the past be a problem. It's from today, it's from the future. This is why you're on the webinar, to hopefully appreciate why it is so important to talk to staff about mental health. So it is your responsibility to discuss mental health with your staff. The Health and Safety Executive Committee, they actually have a framework online that actually talks about this in more detail, which is obviously free to access. So you can go and look at that. But this is about you as a manager, as a company owner, having a legal duty of care to support your staff with their mental health. It's your responsibility to be aware of the workload that you are asking for your mental health. So say, for example, you own a legal firm and you take over another legal firm in a different part of the country, for example, and you expect your staff to take on that workload, that extra workload from the legal firm that you took over, without really having any conversations about how could this impact your mental health? How could this be causing you stress? Then you are putting yourself in a place of liability, because you knew that there would be extra work that would be coming into your organisation and you haven't looked at how you're supporting your employees. So workload is a massive responsibility to be able to look at, what am I expecting my staff member to do? Is it reasonable? It is your responsibility to offer support, and I'm going to help you to do that. Being flexible, looking at any adjustments you can make, and I'll tell you the difference between if it's recognised as a disability, the mental health diagnosis. I will help you understand whether it's you have to by law make adjustments, or whether just because it's the right thing to do you can make adjustments. It's your responsibility to signpost. So if you know there is pressures, there are pressures, there is extra stress on that employee, then it is up to you to signpost, to offer them help. Obviously you can't make them get help, but at least you've signposted and you've covered your legal responsibility. It is also your responsibility to follow up. So if somebody tells you that they're stressed, it might be flippantly while they're making a cup of tea, it is your responsibility to follow it up, to have a conversation and put an action plan in, and then follow up that action plan. It's also your responsibility, and this may sound a bit strange, but I put it in because it's your responsibility to be comfortable with your emotions. And what I mean by that is, if you ask a staff member, you know, about the mental health, and then he or she may get angry or may cry or, you know, go quiet, it's your responsibility just to be able to be comfortable with that and be able to sit with those emotions and not feel threatened or overwhelmed in any way. And I'm going to give you some questions of how you can, you know, be able to be okay with those emotions. So manager's responsibility, again, a short list because we're on a limited webinar. The HSE Executive Committee, there is a framework that you can go into, and they can tell you, it tells you in there what responsibilities you do have. For example, there's more about change. If you're implementing change to somebody, there's a framework to help you manage the change and the stress that may put on the employee. So there's lots of support and help out there. Okay, so what's the employee responsibility? Well, the employee responsibility is to take ownership of what may be causing them stress in their home life. It's their responsibility to face their personal issues and try and get to a successful resolution that is going to minimise the stress and pressure that they are feeling, which may cause poor mental health. It's their responsibility to look after their physical well-being, their mental well-being, their emotional well-being, and spiritual well-being. So it is their responsibility to take care of themselves. Employee responsibility is being adult-like, which means that you as a manager or a company owner, you are not the mother, you are not the father, as I've said, you are not God. It is an equal relationship, adult to adult, in the workplace, resolving the mental health challenges. It is their responsibility to receive help, and that might be from professional support. Like I've said, we can't guarantee that. I had an example at one company that I worked at, offering my services, where they'd asked the individual what help did they need. They'd suggested that maybe there might be some outside organisation to help them deal with the stress from their home life, and that individual would not engage with that outside professional support. We can't make employees do that, but as long as we've documented it, and as long as we've recognised it, and we've documented that the employee chose not to access that support, then we are covered legally, because we have covered our legal duty of care. If they choose not to, that's not our responsibility. It's their responsibility to be honest with you and to listen with you. It's their responsibility to listen to you and therefore be honest with you. The webinar that I'll be doing on the 7th of May, which is about helping employees manage their own mental health, they get this message that your employer can only help you if you are honest with them and if you share what is going on, which is causing you stress. So it works both ways. That's why I deliver both seminars, one for managers and one for employees. So I'm telling you, everybody's getting the same message. So what causes mental health issues to deteriorate at work? So 50% of poor employee mental health is caused by a combination of issues at home and work. CIPD found that in 2016. So let's have a look. And this, while we're reading through the list, as a manager, just maybe have a think about, am I guilty of this? And again, if you are, do not beat yourself up. It's so hard being a manager or company owner because there's so many responsibilities on us, and we are having to manage our own mental health as well. So use this as guidance going forward, not a stick to beat you up with. So, are your employees working long hours and not taking breaks? Now, sometimes employees will do that anyway, even though you're not expecting them to do that, because of their own perception of what they are expected to do. I know of a company where the chief exec was really surprised that 2 of his directors went off with stress, and he had no clue about it. He didn't know that they were feeling that way, that they were feeling stress, because they hadn't had the conversation with him. And he was mortified to think that they'd been working like 13 or 14-hour days. He just thought they were getting through the work in, reasonable expected 8 or 9 hours, because nobody had told him any different. So sometimes it's not us that are expecting our staff to do that. They just do it because they don't want to fail, or they don't want to seem to be letting us down. And that's where having the conversation is so important, which I'll touch on next. Unrealistic expectations and deadlines. So again, it might be that you don't think that the expectations and deadlines are unrealistic, but remember the definition of stress. The definition of stress is the perceived ability to handle the demands. And the only way that you will find out their perceived ability is to have a conversation with them. Is it a high pressure environment? Are there unmanageable workloads? Do they have a lack of control over their work? Are there negative relationships or poor communication? Again, in my work in organisations, I find that it's often problems with, manager and staff member. It's just about communication. It's just about assumptions that each of them have made about the other person. and the workload that is causing the relationship to deteriorate. And often just having an honest conversation clears that, and then allows for a positive dynamic moving forward. Is there an unsupportive workplace culture or lack of management support? How is job insecurity? I know at this moment in time there are a lot of staff members, employees worried about job security at the moment. Is it a high-risk role, such as, you know, armed forces or the police, or, you know, social work? Is it a role where there is high risk? Is lone working an issue? Clearly at the moment, a lot of people are lone working. So even just ringing up your employee and, you know, saying, how's it going working from home, is a step in the right direction. And of course, demanding clients or customers. So, you know, even if you take a screenshot of this page, and maybe over the next few weeks reflect on, are we creating any of that in our organisation, is going to help your staff reduce their stress, reduce poor mental health, which, remember, is going to make them more productive. Because when they're stressed, you can't think logically. When we're stressed, the part of our brain that thinks logically, which is the prefrontal cortex, doesn't work. It just doesn't work. We're running on adrenaline, we're running on cortisol. So therefore, we don't run on logic or rationale or strategic thinking. So if you can reduce the stress caused by any of these things, you're making your staff have increased revenue generating opportunities. So let's have a look at the 4-step process. So if you decide after this webinar to think, actually, I do want to start focusing on mental health, and I do want to make my employees more productive, more profitable, then this is going to be a 4-step process of what you can do. Very simple. Step 1 is to create awareness. So how do you create awareness in your organisation? Again, really, really simple. Often it's just saying, we're going to start talking mental health, guys. You know, that's as simple as it comes. So in team chats, we can start a dialogue and a conversation about mental health. We will start to have one-to-one chats with our staff about mental health, and I'm going to give you a template of how to do that. You might have awareness days such as hashtag It's Mental Health Monday, or hashtag Fun Friday, or hashtag Thoughts Tuesday. You know, you can be as creative as you want with this. Remember what mental health is. Mental health is the way we think, feel and behave. So any awareness you can bring around how are we thinking today, how are we feeling today, how are we behaving today, is you are ticking the mental health box. If you have notice boards in your organisation, obviously when we get back into work, you know, are there some posters that you can put on there about mental health? So you might get in touch with the local clinical commissioning group and say, look, have you got any posters with your support services on, with telephone numbers on, of where my staff can access free confidential advice? Mind have a brilliant resource online of things that you can print off and bring awareness to. We're just going to start focusing on mental health. You could delegate somebody to write a newsletter about mental health, give them it as a project, and they then ask their staff members, they then ask other employees to contribute stories about positive mental health interventions or initiatives that have been on, such as maybe taking up meditation or yoga or read a self-help book, for example. You can simply email, especially in these times now, email about mental health. Start to talk to your employees about mental health and what does that look like for them. So you could delegate a mental health project to a member of your team and say, right, I want to start looking at mental health. What are we going to do? What is that going to look like? It might be charity events that employees want to take up or get involved with your permission. And sometimes it's just as simple as doing a temperature check. So Sometimes it's just as simple in your office, you know, having a piece of flip chart up or having a flip chart board up and drawing a horizontal line, and at one end put, you know, happy, and at the other end put sad, and getting each staff member to, you know, mark where they are on that picture each day or each week, or when they're feeling, you know, if they've had a challenging conversation with a staff member, or a customer, that they can go in and they can draw a sad face, or if they've had a good call, they can put a happy face. That's all we're doing with this stage. We're just creating awareness of how are we thinking, how are we feeling, and how is that affecting our behaviour. On the webinar that I'll be doing on Thursday, the 7th of May, on how to manage your own mental health, I will be showing how your thinking creates your behaviour. So when we come in on a night and we're maybe reaching for that red wine or, you know, can of Stella or whatever, that behaviour is directly related to the thoughts running through our head. But unless we've been shown that, unless we've been taught that, we don't realise that our behaviour is a direct result of our thinking, of what's going through our head. So I'll be talking more about that on the 7th of May. So stage 1 is awareness. How, you know, if you're going to make a note from this, make a note of how am I going to start creating awareness of mental health. So there you are, you're all giddy, you're all excited because you're going to start wanting to talk about mental health and bring it into the organisation, and you're sort of like greeted with, you know, a lot of skeptical looking faces, or a lot of folded arms, or a lot of, you know, people looking away from you in the meeting. So what may stop employees wanting to talk to you about their mental health? And it's quite simple. It comes down to fear, absolute fear. So it's fear of, they're asking themselves, okay, if I'm honest with you about my mental health, is it going to affect my future job prospects? Is it going to affect whether I've got a job? Am I going to be the first one out next time there's some redundancies, for example? Is this going to affect my performance rating? So at my monthly review, am I going to somehow be penalised because you know that I'm feeling really stressed, or that I've suffered with an anxiety disorder for absolute years? They may then think it'll affect bonus payments, promotion. You know, they're going to think, well, I'm not going to be up for promotion because you're going to think that I can't handle, you know, any increased responsibility. They also may be quite fearful about confidentiality, that it may get shared, because people with mental health challenges are often very, very private people, because they've learned to be very strong and manage this on their own, and it's just become part of their persona, part of their psyche, and they just get on with it as much as they have the breakfast and brush the teeth. So you'll find that it's people will not willingly, some people will not willingly want to talk about it in case their colleagues find out or another manager finds out. Sadly, there is stigma and embarrassment about talking about mental health. One of the services that I offer is reducing stigma in organisations. How do we put interventions in the organisation to reduce stigma about mental health? Fear that you think that they can't cope, or that they're weak, or that they're stupid, that they're inadequate in some way, that they're not capable to do the job. And in summary, it's that they're just fearful of a negative reaction. So a lot of company owners will say to me, well, how do I get over that, Rach? What do I do about that? And the way that I find is one of the best ways to get over that is self-disclosure from a manager or a company owner or a supervisor. And is to talk about a time when you have suffered with mental health and how it affected you and how you got help. You know, you see a lot of celebrities coming out and a lot of sort of like sports people coming out and sort of like admitting that they've struggled. And of course we struggle. We all struggle with mental health, because that's life. Life is continually putting pressure on us. So if you can show some humility, show some vulnerability, and they can look at you and think, wow, well, they're admitting it, they've been through it, and look at where they are, look at how they manage, then it increases the chance and the likelihood of your staff members of opening up to you. And we remember, we want them to open up to us so that we can help them, so they become more productive, and also we're doing the right thing for them. So that's step one, raising the awareness. Step two is to have the conversation. And a nice little image there that clearly if somebody broke the leg or broke their arm, we know that they're not all right. We can see that they're not all right. That's the challenge with mental health. We just can't see it in a lot of people because we're so good at hiding it and just getting on with our life. So this is how we're going to have the conversation. So how do I talk about it? First of all, remember, you do not have to be an expert. All you're going to do is use your leadership skills of all the brilliant skills that have got you to where you are today as a leader or company owner. Common sense, empathy, being approachable, caring, listening, just like you would about anything else. If they start to tell you that they suffered with diabetes, you would handle that, you would deal with that. I think what happens a lot of the time is, as soon as we think mental health, we get scared and we think this is an arena that I have no knowledge of. And what I'm trying to tell you is, don't worry about that. It's not your job to rescue. It's your job to intervene. So reassure them that you are there to help and be part of the solution. It's not about diagnosing or finding a cause. So it's not for you to sit there and think, gosh, this really sounds like anxiety, or this really sounds like depression. All we need to know is this employee demonstrating poor mental health or good mental health? It's not about using medical language, so we wouldn't say, oh God, you seem really depressed, or you seem as though you've got an anxiety disorder. We don't need to make it about that. All it's about is about just being about yourself, and be open to hearing and be open to sharing your experience, whilst reassuring them that it is private and confidential, and being mindful of what they are actually telling you. So use language that suits you both. So this is when, if you decided to implement having, say, for example, a regular one-to-one chat to talk about mental health, you might decide to include it in the monthly performance reviews that you are doing with your staff, that hopefully you are doing with your staff. You might just see them go into the coffee room and see that they're on their own and just think, do you know what, they've just been a little bit quiet recently. I'm just going to go in and have a word. So, you can, again, screenshot this to give you examples, or get in touch with Humber Business Growth Hub to, get a copy of these. So something quite, calming, like, I noticed that you have been really quiet recently and wondered how you are. Bang, you're opening up the conversation. That is you talking about mental health. You're doing it there and then. And just to say, guys, some of you will already be doing this without even realizing that you are, ticking the mental health box, so to speak. How are you feeling? You seem a little down recently. You seem to be overwhelmed. Is there anything we, the company, can do to help? Yesterday, I sensed you were unhappy and wondered if we could talk about it. So, how many times do we have a meeting with somebody and they maybe strop out of the room, and we just don't go back in there to clean it up? We just think, oh, well, they'll calm down, they'll come in tomorrow, they'll be happier. And then the next day they come in and, they seem to be back to normal, and we just allow that. Yet clearly at the time, there was something that was causing them an emotional reaction. And the strong, courageous leaders are not afraid of going in and having these conversations. Part of my role is to look at the demands being placed upon you at work, which it is, and I wondered if you would like to give me some feedback. Now, again, how brave is that of you to be asking that question to somebody? Because you're probably going to get some feedback that probably is going to either increase your workload, or it might be a bit of a criticism, or it might cause you extra pressures. Yet remember, this is always about, how can I reduce the demands on my employee so that they become more productive? Or I might need to give that employee some training so that they can cope with the demands that I'm giving them or wanting to give them, but I need to know what they are struggling with. So it takes courage to ask for feedback. One of the best things I ever read in a book was, as a parent, to ask your children, how can I be a better parent? How can I be a better mum? And you know, I asked my son that when he was 10. He's 15 now, and I, you know, still check in. How can I be a better mum to you, Luke? Because I want to know that, so that he can tell me. Now, I might not agree with everything he says, like give me more pocket money, or, you know, I want to eat more Haribo with me broccoli or whatever. I might not agree with everything, but just to get that feedback. So, you know, great place to be asking your employees, how can I be a better manager? Again, it takes courage, because we might hear something that we don't really want to hear, but you're building that loyalty, you're building that relationship with your employee. We don't seem to have laughed much recently. How are you feeling about work? So the point of this slide, guys, is you do it in the language that is right for you. If there's nothing on here that feels right for your persona, your personality, then you do it in the right way for you, and you use the language in the right way for you. I don't care how you do it, but start to have the conversation, because you're going to get, you know, given so much valuable intel about how you can make your staff more productive. Okay, so once they do start to open up, and hopefully they will, and remember, even if they don't, you document that you've asked these questions, and even if they don't open up, you are covered. So then if they go off with stress, you know, 6 months down the line, you asked the question, they chose not to give you the answer. You've met your duty of care. So once they open up, remember, you're not a counsellor. Don't start thinking of solutions, even though counsellors don't start thinking of solutions. Don't think that you have to fix it. You're just wanting to get more information. So, you know, somebody says, well, yeah, actually, I'm just feeling really overwhelmed and I just want to cry on a night, and I've been thinking about ringing in sick. Yeah. Okay. How long have you been feeling this way? Have you spoken to anyone else about it? How may your work be negatively affecting this situation? So something might be going on in the workplace which is making their stress and mental health even worse. So if we can find out what that is, then we have done our job. How may your work be positively affecting this situation? So sometimes people with mental health, actually with mental health problems, challenges, actually prefer going to work because it takes their mind off the situation. So it may be that they can give you some information about, well, actually, I like it when you put me on the help desk because my mind is just, you know, engaged for the 2 hours that I'm on there, and I just tend to forget about what's going on at home or something like that. So 2 really good questions there. What would you like to happen going forward short term? So imagine if it was Angela, she might say, actually, I just really need to go and look at a care home at 2 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon. Is there any way that I can take an extended lunch hour, or can I, you know, not have my lunch hour the day before and, you know, go and have 2 hours? It sounds really simple, and you might think, well, wouldn't she be asking me that anyway? Often no, because employees don't like to think that they're, you know, putting problems on you. Some employees anyway. Okay, so if we were sat face to face, or if I was presenting to you face to face, this would be in a booklet that I would be giving you. So apologies, you're going to have to sort of like screenshot it or write the questions down. But this is a template for being able to have really effective conversations around mental health and understanding the perspective from the employee about their mental health. So number 1, what helps you have good mental health? And in brackets, I'm just saying stay stress-free, because remember, stress is the start of mental health deteriorating. So what helps you have good mental health? Now, you know, you might want to give the employee these questions, you know, say a few days before, because if you've not discussed mental health before and then all of a sudden you start asking them questions like this, they probably will not be in a place to be able to answer them. So, you know, you can either give them a template before or say, these are the type of things that we're going to be talking about, or maybe do a little group session before you start the one-to-ones and, you know, talk about your outcomes, your intentions, where you're trying to go. Number 2, what can we start doing to support you in having good mental health? Stay stress-free at work. Now, again, it might be like my 10-year-old that said, can I have more Haribo with me chicken, Mum? It's like, no, I'm not going to give you more Haribo with your chicken, Luke. Doesn't mean to say you're going to do what they're asking for, but there might be some really simple, quick wins that you can put in place that helps them stay stress-free. And you're building the loyalty, you're building the engagement, you're building the presenteeism with your staff members. So we've asked, what can we do as an employer to support you? And then number 3, brilliant question. Okay, what can you do to support yourself in having good mental health? So remember, guys, it's a joint responsibility that we're talking about. We'll do our bit and help you manage the stress, the work stuff that's creating the stress. But what are you going to do to manage that stuff at home? So, you know, if you're in an abusive relationship, what are you going to do to try and get some help or support with that? How will I know if you have poor mental health, bracket stressed, including any early warning signs? So the staff member might say, well, I start to get really fidgety, or I withdraw, or, you know, I don't speak to any of my colleagues. That's a sign that my anxiety is coming on. We need to know that, because as a manager, I want to be aware of that so that I know if I can put in any feasible interventions. What support can we put in place when you start to struggle with your mental health? So again, what can I do to help? You might get an employee say, if you could just get the team leader just to sort of like take me to a side and just tell me that everything's going to be okay, for example, might be something just as simple as that. What do you need from me, the organisation, or your colleagues going forward? What 3 actions can we take right now to help you? And again, let's give them the responsibility as well. What 3 actions can you take right now to help yourself? Anything else which you would like to share, which you feel is important for us to know? And at the end of the conversation, how happy are you with the outcome of this conversation? Now, importantly, you both sign and date the meeting notes, whether you type them up afterwards or you do it there and then, because basically what you're doing, even from a legal point of view, is showing that you've, you know, asked these questions, you've tried to help, you've tried to reach out, and so you're meeting your legal duty of care. So there would be no chance, or very little chance, one would hope, that in the future you're going to get a tribunal slapped on you, or an unfair dismissal, or whatever, because you have covered yourself. Okay, so this is one of my favourite slides that I use a lot with organisations and clients. And what you'll see there is 4 different circles, and the comfort zone is we all operate in a comfort zone. So we all repeat habits and behaviours every day that make us feel safe. I'm not saying they make us feel good, I'm saying they make us feel safe. So we all operate in our comfort zone. What happens then is we can move into the fear zone. So when the thought of talking about mental health with your staff might be right now pushing you into that fear zone, and all that is a lack of self-confidence, because you've probably not done it before. So if we haven't done something before, we have a lack of self-confidence of whether we're going to be able to handle it. So we find excuses, we're maybe affected by others' opinions. So we may say to our finance director, oh, I'm thinking of talking about, you know, mental health. You know, maybe they have some fear and like, oh no, I don't think we should go there. So when we're in that fear zone, we can, you know, totally freak out and let ourselves be overwhelmed with our own fear and other person's fear. But then we move into the learning zone, and this is where hopefully you'll all decide to go into, where you extend that comfort zone. You start talking about mental health. You acquire the skills by practicing talking about mental health with your team members, and you deal with any challenges or problems that come along. And it may be that when you do start talking mental health with your staff, you know, there are some issues that come to light that you need to start dealing with. It may be that there's a certain manager that is not really, you know, meeting their job role as a manager in supporting their staff. So, you know, is it going to maybe increase your workload? Yes, it is. But is the end result going to be even better, that you're going to have more harmonious working relationships, that people are going to be more have more productivity? And that's when you're in your growth zone, and that's when you can really start to push your business forward, because you know you've got all your staff working at optimal mental health. So they're all at peak performance. They're all, you know, revenue generating assets. Okay, so step 3 is action. So let's just talk about what action you have to take if your staff, you know, start revealing mental health. So under the Equality Act 2010 and under the disability, we have to, I'll skip back to that, we have to make reasonable adjustments if employers, if employees have disabilities, whether they are physical or mental health conditions. So if you start talking to your staff member and it becomes apparent that they have a disability that is a recognised mental health condition, then by law, under the Equality Act 2010, you have to make reasonable adjustments. Now, what I would say is if somebody has got a mental health condition that is recognised as a disability, you will probably know about it already. They probably would have told you already. So disability is classed as if you have a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial and long-term negative effect on your ability to do normal activities. Now, what I would say for this is, if you start talking about your staff and they say, well, yes, I have got a disability, and you have to make reasonable adjustments, they have to prove from a qualified professional that this disability is recognised. So it's not just up to them to say, I've got this disability. There has to be a qualified professional, such as, I would imagine, a psychiatrist, you know, or a psychologist, but use your HR or you know, your legal expertise on this. As I said at the start, you know, my expertise is mental health, not understanding the law about disabilities. But just to say that if you do have a staff member that tells you that it's a disability and that you have to make adjustments, you need to see the proof from the professional that has said it's a disability. So if they do tell you that they have a disability, then by law you have to make reasonable adjustments, such as altering start and finish times, reduction in working hours or being flexible, altering break times, altering targets or tasks, reallocation of duties. You might introduce a buddy system, working from home if applicable, working from another location, flexibility with appointments, training support. So giving them training and support, coaching or medical advice, giving them time out or a safe space zone. So if they have a recognised disability for mental health, then by law you have to be doing those reasonable adjustments. However, what I would say is, if you start having conversations with your staff members and you find out that you have got an Angela or that you have got a David that has all this stuff going on that is putting immense pressure on them, then for me it's about saying, right, how can I look at making some reasonable adjustments here? So you're not having to do it by law, but as a humane employer, understanding that if you help the staff member, the majority of them are going to help you back because it's increasing loyalty in the relationship. You're going to look at, can I do any of these things to help this staff member that's struggling with their mental health? Now, I will say, what you do for one, you maybe have to do for another. So, you know, it's about being mindful of what adjustments you can make. And in the idea and the hope that it is going to reduce the mental health problems that individual is having, therefore making them back to being a revenue generating asset. So if you want more information on that, if you check out mindfulemployer.net, and there's a lot more information on that, or speak to your qualified professional, HR professional or legal advisor about that. So final part of the process, of having these mental health conversations is reviewing and following up. So when you have the conversation, even if it's just a little chat in the coffee room or whatever, make sure you keep notes to protect you both and monitor the actions. Obtain agreement on accuracy, reassure them that they are valued and supported, and reassure them that what actions they have responsibility to go and sort out and what actions you have responsibility to go and sort out. And set a date to follow up and make sure you stick to it. This is not one of those cases like what I hear so often when I go into organisations about performance reviews, that, you know, sometimes staff members haven't had a performance review for 3 months or 6 months because the date got missed and, you know, the manager was busy or whatever. If you're going to, you know, start monitoring mental health and make this a priority, make sure you stick to following up the actions that you've both agreed at the conversation from the outset, because otherwise it'll just take all that brilliant hard work away if you're not following it up and sticking to it, because they'll just think it's not a priority to you. So poor mental health does not equate to poor performance. With the right support, those with the mental health, struggling with the mental health, can thrive at work. And that was a report done by Stevenson and Farmer that Theresa May asked them to do, to look at mental health in the workplace. It's a really good report if anybody wanted to read it. So with the right support, people with poor mental health can thrive at work. And remember that you're an employee too. So, you know, ask yourself, okay, as a manager, as a company owner, I understand that I've got this responsibility, but primarily I've got a responsibility for my own mental health. And I love that image. You can't pour from an empty cup. Take care of yourself first. And it's a bit like, you'll read it in any self-help book, the idea that if you're on an aeroplane, when they say, right, if anything happens, lots of oxygen, make sure you put your mask on first before helping, you know, little children or older parents or whatever. And it's just because of the idea that if you don't put your mask on and get oxygen, you can't help others. So this is the same analogy. To make sure you can support others with mental health, make sure you support yourself first and look at your mental health. So my next webinar that I'll be doing for Humber Business Growth Hub is 7th of May, 2:30 p.m. and it will be looking at techniques and strategies to support your mental health. So what can you do to think, feel and behave outstanding, and to avoid stress, to manage stress, to decrease stress. So finally, do remember you're not God. You are not there to make all your employees' mental health pressures, struggles disappear. You're just there to intervene, create a space and signpost. Some of you will be already doing all this naturally. You know, what I would say is just formalize it a little bit, just put it into a bit of a document, get some actions going, date it so that you've got it there in the personnel file. And please don't let fear of saying or doing the wrong thing stop you from being human. You know, I think we can sometimes all get very paranoid of, you know, policies and legal risk. As long as you are coming from a good place in your heart centre of, you know, what can I do to help this person whilst being aware of the business needs, then I don't think you can go far wrong. So just 4 or 5 minutes to go, ready for if there's any questions. So I've told you about your role and responsibilities regarding employee mental health. It's for you to intervene, to signpost and to be aware of what you can change in the workplace to reduce any stress or pressures. The Health and Safety Executive Committee has a really good website that you can go on and get some really good material from there. That's what I do when I go into organisations and help the organisation, you know, have a mental health policy, putting it all together, putting a framework together and offer training for the staff. We've defined good mental health and how to recognise it in others. If you want more information on that, then check out mind.org. They have a list on there, or I'll be talking about that more on the Thursday the 7th webinar. Looking at how to teach your employees to take responsibility for their mental health. So that was where we talked about their responsibilities and your responsibilities. how to have effective conversations, that was the 4-stage process that we went through, and how to take ownership of providing optimum working conditions to promote positive mental health in your workplace. And that was the list that I gave you that said, let's not use this as a stick to beat you, let's use this as a map going forward of how you can improve working conditions in order to reduce mental health, in order that your staff become revenue generating assets. So that's me. That's just before 4 o'clock. Has anybody got any questions that want to come through the chat box?
I think we've had a few come through, Rachel, and I've got a couple as well, if that's okay. First of all, thank you very much for quite an insightful presentation there. It must be quite difficult doing such a lengthy monologue online without much participation. So I do thank you for the audience today, so thank you for that. Elaine's asked, should businesses have a well-being mental health policy in addition to a health and safety policy?
Yes, I would absolutely 100% be an advocate of that. In fact, a mental health wellbeing policy should be at the core of every other policy that you have. And when I go into organisations, that's what we do. We look at how can we integrate a new policy that sits with all the other policies. So yes, brilliant question. Definitely.
A couple of questions for me, just while we wait to see if anyone else has got any questions. How do you judge, or what's your strategy for ensuring? Well, it's a two-part question really. The first part is, if you've got someone that's clearly suffering from a mental health condition, but doesn't see it themselves. So I was quite interested in one of your earlier slides, not being able to make decisions, not being able to perhaps prioritize, quite grumpy people, but doesn't see themselves as having a mental health issue that's driving that behavior. How would you coach, how would you manage that situation?
Yeah, and I think that's a really valid point. And I think that's one thing in my experience over the last 15 years is that those type of people just tend to get labelled as sort of like negative, or, you know, saboteurs in the business, or they're just not productive, or they're not as effective as that other staff member. And it always roots down to that you're right, they do have some mental health struggles, but because it's not discussed, or because it's not talked about, because we're not educated about it, we don't realise that our mental health is causing that behaviour. So that's where I would, if that were me in my company, I would be having the conversations around, you know, the template that I went through, the 10 questions about what do you think good, you know, what causes you to be stressed, what can I do to stop, what can you do? And it's not about sort of like labelling that, well, I think it might be a bit of anxiety, or it's just helping them realise that their behaviours are a result of how they're thinking. Because what happens is people just get used to the way that they behave. They just think that, well, that's just me, you're not going to change me, not realising that they can be upskilled, they can be shown, they can be taught emotional resilience, which means they can cope with the added pressures, or with pressures that are coming on. So I would be having the template conversation with them that I went through, and then also looking to give them some coaching or emotional resilience training.
That's great. Okay, and my next question is kind of on the flip side of that, really, which is a bit later on in your presentation, you talked about asking for feedback and encouraging people to, you know, talk about their mental health issues and how you can assist. Do you have any experience of people that have been playing the system, shall we say, and using mental health as a way to avoid work, or to lessen their priorities in work, or lessen their own workload, push it onto the people?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they say that, you know, stress is sort of the new bad back, don't they, type thing. But yes, that's why I put that slide in about the, you know, snakes in suits. And I'm not saying that these people are doing it maliciously. It's just a conditioned pattern of behaviour where they've how can I put it? They have a pattern of behaviour where they're not able to take responsibility. And so it's often because there's such a heightened sense of shame inside of them. Not that they would know this, not that they would explain this to you, but there's a heightened sense of shame that they feel helpless. They feel as though they can't make a difference, but instead of being vulnerable, it's like a defense mechanism that comes down where they do play the system. They do what I call play victim. They don't take responsibility. They don't earn anything. It's not them, it's you. Well, if only you would change as an employer, if only you would do X, Y, and Z different, then I would be okay. And with people like that, it's again what the slide said, it's about having a committed action plan about what are they going to do differently, what are you going to do differently, and then that might lead into like a more of a performance review conversation that you're going to be having. So maybe weekly about, okay, you said that you were going to go and reach out to the doctors or whatever. Did you get an appointment? No, I couldn't get an appointment. Okay, well, let's start now then. So by next Wednesday, I want you to go and get an appointment. And, you know, you'll get to a point where you realise that, yes, they are just playing the system and they're using their mental health as a get out of jail free card. And that's when you have to bring in, you know, the HR advice and the, you know, the legal point of view about, I might need to manage this person out of the business. If they're not willing to take responsibility to change and to earn what's going on for them, then I might have to, you know, manage them out of the business.
Okay, thank you. It does, thank you, Rach. Yeah, that's really helpful. Another question that's come in from the group. If someone has a condition such as ADHD, is this an example of a condition we should be making adjustments on?
If it's been recognised under the Disability Act, so if they have got something formal in writing that is saying under the Equality Act, this is recognised as, you know, a disability that is affecting them. I think they've got to have had it for 12 months or so, but so only if you've got proof from a professional that it is recognised under the Disability Act.
Okay, I hope that answers your question. We are available for a few more minutes for anybody else that's got any other questions. What I would suggest to everybody at this point, Rachel's mentioned a few times now that she doesn't move into HR employment law side of this type of advice. However, as part of the Humber Growth Hub support under this program that we're running today, we run a weekly session on a Wednesday, which some of you might have been attending. It's in the afternoon, 2 till 4. We have a host of speakers available, and one of our speakers is a HR consultant and specialist that can provide HR employment advice and support. So if, having heard the presentation today, anyone's interested in asking some questions, it's a very similar format as today. You'll hear a variety of different presentations, about an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes. And at the end, we have a panel discussion, as we are now, where you can ask your questions. So if today's set your mind rolling in terms of questions that you might need to check from an employment law perspective, I'd highly recommend that anybody goes on to the Humber Growth Hub website, which you can see on your screen now. If you go to the events section, you'll be able to see the weekly COVID-19 drop-in sessions that we run for the Growth Hub. They run every Wednesday. They're scheduled for the next 2 or 3 weeks, and we'll probably continue until we come back to some form of normality. So please get yourselves booked onto that. You'll hear Rachel again going into details as she's done today on mental health. We also talk about employment law, contingency planning, the national government support and the local government support for businesses and sole traders. And we talk about finance and legal matters as well for businesses. So it's a one-stop shop that can apply for anybody that's in business at the moment. One more question that's just come in, Rachel. I've been away there. Project managers have very tight schedules. Is there some way of managing their mental health which you may advise? So those that are perhaps on very tight, time pressures or just generally stressful workloads.
Yeah, well, what comes to mind is straight away is that, they're probably, for me, if it was my business, I would be focusing on them sort of as priority, because they're, if you like, key workers in the sense of the business, in that they're driving the projects forward. But you're really just looking at this using the same structure that we've been talking about in this webinar, but more importantly, I guess, for them to be able to be trained in understanding how they can be responsible for their own mental health, because a lot of it comes down to perception. So it comes down to how they perceive their job role as a project manager and what belief beliefs they have about, I've got to get everything done on time, I've got to be done by this deadline, I can't fail, I'm not allowed to fail. So in the webinar that I'll be doing on the 7th of May, I'll be talking a lot more about those perceived demands and how we're brought up to, you know, not allow ourselves to fail, not allow ourselves to be criticised, to get disapproval, to ask for help. And actually that's what causes a lot of the mental health problems, because it's the perception of how we have to be in our role and in the workplace. So, you know, if there's any project managers on, that would be a really good webinar for them to get involved with.
Right. Okay. It's actually very worth me mentioning as well that the next session that you are running will be also on the Growth Hub's website on their event page. So if anyone is interested in joining that session as a follow-on to today, you can simply book your place by visiting the Growth Hub website. One more comment that's come through. Something else that's come through here. I teach mental health first aid. Do you think that this will be something more companies will look at when we start returning to work?
Yeah, I would hope so, because the mental health first aid is excellent for giving managers an awareness of, you know, what types of symptoms and how to recognise signs. So I'm really hoping that this COVID is really going to sort of like make people a lot more aware of mental health. I know I don't particularly watch the news a lot, but I have heard that on the news are talking a lot more about mental health in the workplace and how many more people are going to be struggling with mental health. So yeah, I would really hope that the mental health at workplace would be it's a great intervention. It's been about for a lot of years. Again, it's just raising that awareness of mental health. I think that's the problem. There's such a stigma and there's such fear about the subject of mental health that anybody like a mental health first aider going in there and going, hey, this is what it's about, there's nothing to be scary about, is a really, really good thing for any company to take on board.
I think if I was to add anything to that, I've been running Blue Orchid now for like 18 years. And mental health as a subject matter isn't something that's normally asked of us as a project deliverer. So for those that don't know Blue Orchid, who may have thought we, by the title of our name, we're a Thai restaurant, we run government-funded contracts across the country, largely for business startup support and for business growth. And mental health hasn't really come under the parameters of what we've been able to deliver from our funders in the past. Rachel and I have actually been speaking about this a few months ago before the pandemic hit us, and suddenly now, across the country, we've been asked to deliver these types of sessions, which I've always thought were very important. I've always thought that they're an important makeup of running a business to make sure. I think something you said earlier on, Rachel, I think your employees are your biggest asset. And listening to your presentation, there's certainly some things I've taken away. But I've also had a bit of a reassured confidence that there's a lot that we are doing that does help maintain a healthy, happy lifestyle for our employees. My hope, my view is that moving forward, once the pandemic's finished now, we'll get to deliver these types of workshops a lot more often now, because it will be seen as an integral part of running the business and growing the business. So absolutely. Yeah, to answer your question from my perspective as a project deliverer, I think it's quite important. Our next comment, clearly you've had more of an impact than I have, Rachel, because the next comment is thank you to Rachel and Patrick. My name's Paul, but we'll forgive you for that.
Thank you very much.
I've been called a lot worse. Yeah. Do we have any other questions from today? From anybody? Okay. As I say, if you may switch off from today and reflect on what you've heard today and decide that you've got some burning questions you're answering. As I say, as of tomorrow, which is Wednesday, at 2 o'clock, we'll be running the COVID-19 business drop-in session. If you want to book onto that, please go to the Humber Business Growth website. Get yourself a place booked on there if you've not already attended before. You'll be sent a link for a go-to webinar, and we'll hopefully see you then. They run every week, every Wednesday at 2 o'clock. Same agenda, same speakers, updated information, but a chance for you to ask any of the questions you want as a one-stop shop. And then your session, which was when, Rachel?
Thursday, the 7th of May at 2:30, managing your own mental health. So excellent for managers, company owners, you know, anybody. And
once again, to book your place on that and secure your place, and obviously the places are unlimited on this now because it's online. Just go to the Humber Growth Hub website and get yourself a place booked on there. One more question's coming about the slides. You can access the slides. These will appear on the Growth Hub website shortly. They have a copy of these, but if you are wanting them quicker, if you email the Humber Growth Hub email box, the one that you've probably inquired to get onto this workshop today, and ask for a copy of the slides from today, they'll provide them for you. What I would also encourage everybody to do that's, on this workshop today is we value your feedback. So if anybody's got any feedback in terms of how the session's gone today, if you'd like to see more content in the future or other topics included in this period of time where we're all working from home or remotely, please let the Growth Hub know. We do encourage feedback all the time. We want to make sure we're putting on the right types of support digitally as we can to support everybody. The COVID sessions are great on a Wednesday. But please do let us know if you've got any other comments or feedback in terms of topics you'd like to see covered. Recording, I'm not sure. We have recorded the session today to answer Polly's question. It's down to the Growth Hub to decide whether or not they publish that or not, or whether or not they want people to rebook onto the next workshop. So I'm pretty sure that if you ask for a copy, as long as it's recorded, we have had some technical issues with the recordings of the last couple of weeks. As long as it is recorded successfully, if you speak to the Growth Hub, I'm sure they'll be able to direct you where you can access the recording post-event. Okay. Have we got any more questions before we come to a close? Okay, that just leaves me to say many thanks once again to Rachael for your time today and your insights and your very practical support. I think it's been really useful and it's increased my confidence as a business owner, certainly. And we'll look forward to hearing from you again in future sessions. So thank you to Rachael, thank you to everybody else. Stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you tomorrow and in future sessions. Many thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks for listening, guys. Thanks, Paul.